Oliver Robinson came home 3 days early. The black Escalade rolled silently into the underground garage of his Manhattan penthouse, rain streaking down the windshield like the city itself was trying to warn him. He sat behind the wheel longer than necessary, fingers resting loosely on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the concrete wall ahead. Something was wrong. Not in the dramatic way danger usually announced itself to him. No gunfire, no frantic calls, no instinctive spike of adrenaline. This was quieter, subtler. The kind of wrong that slid under the skin and stayed there. He hadn't texted, hadn't called. Oliver liked control, but he loved surprises, especially when they involved Linda. He stepped out of the vehicle, the sound of rain echoing faintly in the enclosed space. The garage lights flickered on automatically, illuminating polished concrete and spotless luxury. Everything looked exactly as it should, except when he looked up. Every light in the penthouse above was on. Not warm, not welcoming. Bright, clean, surgical. Linda had told him she'd be at a charity board dinner until midnight. She'd kissed him goodbye that morning, fingers lingering at his collar, eyes soft, voice sweet as she told him she wished he didn't have to travel. She'd said she missed him already. She'd lied. The elevator ride felt too long, too quiet. The soft chime of passing floors sounded louder than it should have, each note landing like a countdown. Oliver stood still, shoulders relaxed, face unreadable, but his body had already shifted into something colder, sharper. When the doors opened, the smell reached him first. Not perfume, not wine, something metallic, clinical, like antiseptic, like latex gloves and sealed rooms, like evidence. His hand slid instinctively inside his jacket, fingers brushing the grip of his pistol. 15 years in the American underworld had trained his body to react before his mind could catch up. He didn't question it. He trusted it. He moved down the hallway without sound, expensive shoes gliding over imported stone. The penthouse was immaculate, too immaculate. No music, no laughter, no trace of Linda's usual presence. Then he saw them. Through the half-open bedroom door, Linda stood in front of the wall safe. Not the decoy one in the closet, but the real one, hidden behind the art piece Oliver had once joked was worth more than most people's houses. The safe that held 15 years of secrets, money, records, insurance. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, not a single strand out of place. Latex gloves covered her hands. She wasn't nervous, she wasn't rushing. She was focused. Beside her stood Alexander, his chief of security, the man who had taken a bullet for him in Miami. The man Oliver had promoted over men twice his age. The man he trusted with his life. Alexander held a sealed evidence bag. Inside it, fabric darkened with old blood. Oliver's vision narrowed. This wasn't an affair. This was an execution. Rage rose fast, hot and familiar. One step forward, one clean shot. End it now. End them both before sunrise. He'd done worse for less. Had buried men who'd betrayed him without losing sleep. His body shifted, weight settling into the stance his father had drilled into him years ago. And then, a hand clamped over his mouth. Firm, precise. A body pressed him back into the shadowed corridor with terrifying control, forcing his shoulder against the marble wall. The impact should have made noise, should have alerted the room. It didn't. Whoever held him knew exactly how to move. Oliver's training flared. He could break this. Twist left. Elbow back. Reverse the grip. 3 moves. 2 seconds. But something stopped him. A scent. Warm, subtle, shea butter and something faintly floral. And a whisper, urgent and controlled, brushed his ear. Stay quiet. Oliver froze. Carolyn, his assistant, the woman who organized his calendar, filtered his calls, took notes in meetings no one ever remembered she attended, the woman everyone overlooked, including him. But the grip pinning him wasn't that of a secretary. And when he turned his head just enough to see her face, the eyes staring back at him weren't frightened. They were alert, calculating, alive with something that knew danger intimately. Carolyn wasn't looking at him. She was looking down, her free hand lifted slowly, deliberately, pointing to the floor just beyond the bedroom threshold. At first, Oliver saw nothing, just Italian tile, just polished stone. Then he noticed it. A thin wire stretched across the doorway, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. A tripwire. Explosives. Carolyn leaned closer, her lips barely moving. "They've rigged the room," she whispered. "Motion trigger. Silent alarm tied to federal surveillance." Federal. The word hit harder than any bullet. Alexander wasn't just betraying him. He was handing him over. Carolyn slowly released her hand from Oliver's mouth but kept her body close, shielding him from view. "Linda isn't who you think she is," she murmured. "And neither is Alexander." As if on cue, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, far enough to ignore, close enough to feel. They were early. Carolyn's eyes flicked toward the bedroom, then back to Oliver. "If you step forward," she said quietly, "you don't leave this building alive." For the first time in 15 years, Oliver Robinson didn't move. Not because he was afraid, but because, suddenly, the world he understood had cracked open and the only person standing between him and a carefully planned death was the woman he had never truly seen. Carolyn tilted her head toward the hallway. "We need to move," she said. "Now." They slipped away like ghosts, her hand resting briefly against his chest, right over his heart, as if she were measuring the thing she'd just saved. The bedroom door remained half open behind them. Linda laughed softly at something Alexander said. Neither of them noticed the silence closing in. If this chapter pulled you in, like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and comment the city you're watching from. This is only the beginning. They moved without speaking. Carolyn guided Oliver backward down the corridor, her palm light but firm against his chest, steering him away from the bedroom like she was moving a chess piece off a board already rigged to explode. Her steps were measured, silent. She knew the rhythm of the penthouse better than he did, where the floor creaked, where the cameras blinked, where the light fell wrong. That realization landed harder than the sirens growing louder below. They slipped into the private study at the east end of the penthouse, the room Linda never entered, the room Oliver had built for solitude and strategy. Carolyn closed the door with a soft, final click and killed the lights in the same motion, plunging them into shadow. For half a second, there was only the sound of Oliver's breathing. Then he moved. The gun was in his hand before thought caught up to muscle memory, the barrel steady, leveled at Carolyn's chest. At this distance, even a suppressed shot would be loud. He didn't care. "Talk," he said, voice low and lethal. "Now." Carolyn didn't raise her hands. She didn't flinch. She stood exactly where she was, shoulders squared, eyes steady in the dim glow, bleeding in from the city beyond the window. The calm on her face wasn't bravery. It wasn't denial. It was control. "If you're going to shoot me," she said quietly, "do it before the sirens reach the lobby." Oliver's jaw tightened. "You have 10 seconds. Carolyn nodded once, as if accepting terms in a negotiation she'd already anticipated. She reached slowly into her bag, pausing just long enough to let him track the movement, then placed a small black flash drive on the edge of his desk. "That's everything," she said. "Every conversation, every plan, every lie." He didn't lower the gun. "What is this?" he demanded. "Your fiancée," Carolyn replied, "is not your fiancée." The words landed flat and precise. "She's a federal asset," Carolyn continued. "Her real name isn't Linda Robinson, it's Linda Harper. She specializes in long-term seduction operations, high-value targets with complex financial empires. She embeds, builds trust, manufactures evidence, then watches the man she loves die in custody, while the government seizes everything he owns." Oliver felt something cold spread through his chest. "And Alexander?" he asked. "Paid," Carolyn said. "Promised immunity. Promised a pension and a clean exit. He's been feeding her access points for months." The gun wavered just slightly. Carolyn saw it. "I was sent to watch you," she added. Oliver's finger tightened on the trigger. "By who?" "People who wanted you dead," she said simply. Silence stretched between them, thick and volatile. "I didn't do it," Carolyn went on. "I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't make the call. I didn't sell you out." Why? Oliver asked. The word came out rougher than he intended. Carolyn held his gaze. Because you weren't what they said you were. Outside, the sirens were louder now. Closer. Multiple vehicles. They're about to raid this building, Carolyn said. If you walk out that door, you don't go to trial. You don't get bail. You die in custody within 48 hours. Heart failure. Suicide. A fight you didn't start. Oliver exhaled slowly through his nose. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to survive, she replied. She crossed the room not toward him, but toward the bookshelf lining the east wall. Her movements were economical, practiced. She pressed a specific volume inward. A section of the wall slid open. Darkness yawned beyond it. A maintenance shaft, Carolyn said. Installed before the current security system. It bypasses the camera's Alexander controls. Oliver stared at the opening. You planned this? Yes. How long? Carolyn hesitated. Just a fraction. Long enough. Boots echoed faintly through the building, heavy, coordinated. Voices crackled through radios somewhere below. All units, target building, prepare to breach. Oliver looked back at her. If this is a setup. It isn't, she said. If it were, you'd already be in cuffs. She stepped aside, gesturing to the opening. We have 90 seconds. He lowered the gun. Not because he trusted her completely, but because every instinct he had told him she was right. As he moved toward the shaft, Oliver glanced back once more at the desk, at the flash drive waiting there. After, he said. You explain everything. Carolyn nodded. After. They disappeared into the darkness just as the first explosion rattled the far end of the penthouse. They didn't stop running until the city swallowed them whole. By the time they emerged, soaked, bruised, lungs burning, Oliver's phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls. Alerts. Messages stacking faster than he could read them. His empire was collapsing in real time. Carolyn led him into a narrow side street and finally stopped beneath a flickering street light. For the first time since the garage, she looked at him fully. You need to see this now, she said. They ducked into a parked delivery van Carolyn had clearly prepared in advance. She pulled out a tablet, hands steady as she scrolled. Oliver's stomach dropped. Inner circle, poisoned. Accounts, frozen. Properties. Seized under federal order. Alexander hadn't just betrayed him. He'd erased him. They used oleander, Carolyn said quietly. Tasteless. Mimics cardiac failure. Alexander ordered it 2 weeks ago. Oliver stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Why tell me? He asked again. Why save me? Carolyn's voice softened, just slightly. Because I watched you. He looked up. For 6 months, she continued. I saw what you did when no one was looking. Hospitals, scholarships, the way you visited your mother's grave every Sunday, no matter what city you were in. She met his eyes. That's not a monster. Before he could respond, she slid the flash drive into the tablet. Audio filled the van. Linda's voice cold, precise. Once the evidence is planted, he's finished. Alexander's laugh followed. By the time the raid hits, he'll panic. Crossfire does the rest. Oliver closed his eyes. They were timing it, Carolyn said. You were supposed to come home tonight, walk in, see them, lose control. And die, Oliver finished. Yes. Silence fell again, broken only by the rain tapping the roof. If this twist just flipped everything you thought you knew, like this video, subscribe, and comment the city you're watching from. Carolyn pulled the flash drive free and tucked it back into her bag. There's more, she said, but not here. Where? Oliver asked. She started the engine. Somewhere they won't look. As the van pulled into traffic, Oliver leaned back against the seat, the weight of the night finally crashing down on him. His fiancée was a lie. His protector was a traitor. And the woman he'd ignored for months had just saved his life. Oliver Robinson had ruled through fear and loyalty. Tonight, both had failed him, and sitting beside him now was the only person left who knew exactly how deep the trap went. The woman in the shadows. The one who chose him. The maintenance shaft swallowed them whole. Darkness pressed in from every side as Oliver followed Carolyn down the narrow passage, his shoulders scraping concrete, breath loud in his ears. The world above them shook with controlled violence, boots pounding marble, doors being breached, orders barked through radios with military precision. This wasn't a police visit. It was a hunt. Carolyn moved first, descending the welded ladder with practiced ease, her body flowing through the space like it had been measured for her alone. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. Every movement was deliberate, economical. Rungs every 18 inches, she whispered from below. Don't look down. Follow my breathing. Oliver did as instructed, hands finding cold metal in the dark. His suit snagged against a rough edge, fabric tearing softly. He ignored it. Expensive things could be replaced. Lives couldn't. Above them, the penthouse erupted in noise. A battering ram struck wood. Glass shattered. Someone shouted his name. They were already too late. Stop, Carolyn murmured. Oliver froze, muscles screaming as he held himself suspended. She shifted sideways onto a narrow ledge barely wider than a shoebox. Transfer point, she said. Cameras don't reach here. She guided his foot with a firm grip, fingers locking around his ankle with surprising strength. The touch was intimate in the worst possible moment, grounding, unavoidable. They shuffled sideways, backs pressed to cold concrete, until Carolyn dropped smoothly into another vertical shaft. Slide, she whispered. Control your speed. She vanished. Oliver counted to 3, then let go. The chute burned his palms, friction tearing through fabric and skin as he descended. He hit bottom hard, rolled instinctively, and landed in something wet and foul-smelling. Garbage. A hand grabbed his arm, hauling him upright. Move, Carolyn said. We've got seconds. They burst into the underground loading area just as the garage doors began to seal. Carolyn sprinted toward a nondescript van parked beside the dumpsters. Keys already in hand. The engine roared to life, tires squealing as they shot into the rain-slicked street. By the time Oliver caught his breath, the city had swallowed them. Alive, but not intact. His phone vibrated again, and again, and again. He stared at the screen, dread blooming with every notification. Iron circle, unreachable. Emergency medical alerts. Asset freeze pending federal action. Say it, Oliver said hoarsely. Don't soften it. Carolyn didn't look at him as she drove. Alexander poisoned them. The words landed like a body blow. Everyone? Oliver asked. Yes. The van swerved through traffic, rain blurring the city into streaks of light. Carolyn tapped the tablet mounted beside the wheel, pulling up reports as they streamed in. Oleander extract, she continued. Delivered through a celebratory drink. Mimics cardiac failure. Clean. Fast. Oliver closed his eyes. Men he'd grown up with. Men who'd bled for him. Men who'd trusted his judgment. Gone. They're not all dead, Carolyn added quietly. Some might survive if medical response is fast enough, but the structure your command is broken. His phone chimed again. Primary accounts frozen. Properties seized under emergency warrant. Travel alerts issued. Oliver felt hollow. Alexander hadn't just betrayed him. He'd erased him. As if sensing the moment, another message arrived, this one unmistakable. A video file. Carolyn glanced at the screen. That'll be him. Oliver opened it. Alexander's face filled the display, composed, almost apologetic. Nothing personal, boss, Alexander said calmly. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. By the time you see this, you'll already be gone. I made sure it was quick. The video ended. Oliver let the phone fall into his lap. 15 years. That was how long it took to build an empire. And one night to burn it down. They'll paint you as a fugitive, Carolyn said. A violent criminal who resisted arrest. Linda will cry on camera. The narrative's already written. Oliver laughed once, sharp and humorless. My name used to open doors. It closes them now, she replied. The van pulled into an abandoned service tunnel beneath the city. Carolyn killed the engine and finally turned to face him. For the first time since the penthouse, Oliver really looked at her. Her hands bore small cuts from the escape. Her jaw was set, eyes alert, already calculating the next move. "You knew this would happen," he said. "Yes." "When?" Carolyn didn't hesitate. "The moment I heard them talking through the vents." "You planned for my empire to fall. I planned for you to live." She reached into her bag and pulled out a second device, smaller, heavier. "Your black ledger," she said. "Copied, encrypted, backed up in 4 locations." Oliver stared at it. "I never gave you access." "You didn't need to," she replied. "You gave me proximity." The weight of it all finally crushed him. His fiancée was a lie. His protector was a traitor. His empire was ash. Oliver Robinson, the man everyone feared, had nothing left. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed for the first time in years. Carolyn waited. Minutes passed. When he finally looked up, his eyes were clear. "They think I'm finished," he said. Carolyn nodded. "They always do." A thin smile touched her lips. "That's when people make mistakes." Oliver straightened slowly, the pieces of himself shifting into something colder, harder. "Show me the backups," he said. Carolyn handed him the device. "They took your kingdom," she replied, "but they don't know what you left behind." Outside, the city roared on, unaware that a king had fallen, and that something far more dangerous was rising in his place. The safe house didn't look like anything. That was the point. It sat between a shuttered laundromat and a halal butcher in Queens, the kind of building people passed every day without ever really seeing. No cameras outside, no marked entrances, just a rusted steel door and a flickering security light that buzzed like it might die at any moment. Carolyn parked 2 blocks away. "Last precaution," she said, killing the engine. "We don't arrive together." Oliver nodded. He didn't argue anymore. He watched the street instead, delivery trucks idling, a woman dragging groceries up cracked steps, a man arguing on his phone like the world wasn't on fire. Inside him, everything was ash. They entered separately, minutes apart. The apartment itself was sparse but intentional. No personal items. A couch, a table, 2 chairs, and a single desk cluttered with equipment that didn't belong to a woman people mistook for an assistant. Carolyn locked the door, then locked it again. Deadbolt, chain, secondary internal latch. Only then did she exhale. "You're safe here," she said. "For now." Oliver leaned against the wall, exhaustion hitting him all at once. Not physical, something deeper, the kind that came from watching your entire life burn in real time. "Show me," he said quietly, "what you took." Carolyn crossed to the desk and powered on a laptop. The screen came alive instantly. No boot sequence, no delay. She plugged in the device she'd shown him in the van. "Months ago," she began, "I realized Linda wasn't looking for love. She was looking for access." Oliver's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "She studied your habits, your blind spots. She learned what you locked and what you didn't." Carolyn's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, so I started watching her. The screen filled with folders. Dates, audio files, video. "I copied your black ledger 6 months ago," Carolyn said. "Encrypted it. Then I copied it again. And again." Oliver straightened. "You had no right." "I know," she said calmly. "That's why I replaced it." She opened another folder. "Decoys," she continued. "Every financial trail Linda and Alexander think they planted leads to false accounts. Dead ends. Shells that collapse under scrutiny." Oliver stared at the screen, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. "Hope." "You swapped the originals," he said slowly. "Yes." "When?" "The night you were in Zurich," she replied. "You didn't notice because you weren't meant to." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "And the recordings?" he asked. Carolyn clicked again. Linda's voice filled the room. "Once he's in custody, everything becomes civil forfeiture." "Clean." Alexander followed. "I've already poisoned the inner circle. He'll have no one left." Oliver closed his eyes. "They're not just rogue agents," Carolyn said. They're part of a larger machine. Judges, wardens, financial auditors. Everyone gets a cut. She paused, then added, "But machines break when you remove the right piece." Oliver looked at her. "You planned this." "I prepared," she corrected. "There's a difference." He studied her in silence. For the first time since she'd put her hand over his mouth, he saw the cost of what she'd done. There was a scar along her forearm, thin, pale, old. Another near her collarbone, barely visible above the neckline of her jacket. Not decorative, not accidental. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Carolyn hesitated. Then she sat. "I wasn't supposed to care," she said. "I was assigned to observe you, report patterns, weaknesses." "By the same people who wanted me dead," Oliver said. "Yes." She looked down at her hands. They were steady now, but they hadn't always been. "I watched you for months," she continued. "I watched what you did when no one was looking." Oliver said nothing. "You donated to children's hospitals under fake names," she said. "You paid for your driver's daughter's tuition when he was too proud to ask. You visited your mother's grave every Sunday, even when you were exhausted. Even when it rained." Her voice softened. "That's not a monster," she said. "That's a man who learned violence before he learned mercy." The words hit harder than any accusation. Oliver swallowed. "That's why you spared me," he said. "Yes." Silence settled between them, not hostile, not awkward, heavy with understanding. "They think they stripped you of everything," Carolyn went on. "They think you're desperate." She met his eyes. "They don't know what I stole." Oliver felt it, then the shift. Not power returning. Something sharper. "What's next?" he asked. Carolyn closed the laptop. "Next," she said, "we let them believe you're finished." A slow, dangerous smile curved at the corner of Oliver's mouth. "For how long?" "Long enough for them to get careless," she replied. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far away, but they didn't come closer. For the first time since the penthouse, Oliver Robinson didn't feel hunted. He felt armed. And sitting across from him was the woman who had taken his empire apart and handed him the pieces to rebuild it. Night settled slowly over the safe house. Not the loud kind that came with sirens and gunfire, but the quiet, heavy kind that followed catastrophe. The city outside kept breathing, unaware that two people inside this forgettable apartment had just watched an empire collapse. Oliver sat at the small kitchen table, elbows resting on scarred wood, a glass of water untouched in front of him. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Linda's gloved hands, Alexander's calm smile, the flash of a sealed evidence bag. Across the room, Carolyn stood by the window, the blinds half drawn. She'd changed out of her wet clothes, replacing them with something simple: dark jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, no jewelry, no softness. Still, something about her posture had shifted. The urgency was gone. What remained was stillness. "You can sit," Oliver said quietly. She glanced back, surprised, then nodded and took the chair across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was cautious, like two armed people deciding whether to lower their weapons. "You never asked how I knew," Carolyn said eventually. "How you knew what?" Oliver replied. "How to move like that," she said. "How to plan for everything you didn't see coming." Oliver met her gaze. "I assumed you'd tell me when you were ready." That earned him the faintest smile. "I was recruited at 19, Carolyn said. "Not because I was special, but because I was invisible." She leaned back slightly, eyes unfocused now, fixed somewhere far beyond the walls of the room. "I worked 2 jobs. Cleaned offices at night. Went to class during the day. I learned early how to disappear into rooms. People talk when they think no one important is listening." Oliver listened. "They watched me for months," she continued. "Then one day, a woman sat beside me on a subway bench and asked if I wanted to make real money." Her mouth tightened briefly. "They trained me," Carolyn said. "Surveillance, close protection, extraction, how to see patterns others miss." How to survive when violence finds you. And violence did, Oliver said softly. Yes. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The scars had already spoken. Oliver glanced at her forearm again, at the faint white line near her wrist. Knife? He asked. Carolyn nodded. First assignment. I learned quickly. Oliver exhaled slowly. I didn't grow up with choices either. She looked at him then. My father taught me how to shoot before I learned algebra, he said. He called it preparation. I called it survival. He stared at the table. I built what I built because I didn't know how to be anything else. Silence followed, not empty, but shared. Two survivors. Two weapons shaped by circumstance. Carolyn reached for the glass of water and slid it toward him. The gesture was small, human. Why me? Oliver asked. Out of all the men you could have been assigned to, why did you decide I was worth saving? She hesitated. Because you were tired, she said. Not weak, just tired of being what everyone expected you to be. Oliver laughed quietly. You saw that? I saw everything, she replied. You just never looked back. The truth of it landed gently, but firmly. For the first time since the night began, Oliver felt something loosen inside his chest. Not relief, not forgiveness. Recognition. He reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His fingers brushed hers brief, careful. The contact wasn't explosive. It was grounding. Not love. Not yet. Just the acknowledgement of two people who understood what it meant to live on the edge of ruin and choose not to fall. Carolyn withdrew her hand after a moment, standing. We should rest. Tomorrow changes everything. Oliver nodded. Tomorrow, he agreed. As she moved toward the spare room, she paused. For what it's worth, she said without turning, you were never as alone as you thought. Then she disappeared into the shadows. Oliver remained at the table, staring at the door long after it closed. For the first time in years, he didn't feel untouchable. He felt seen. If you're invested in these characters, like this story, subscribe to the channel, and comment the city you're watching. From your support keeps stories like this alive. The lie was everywhere by morning. It crawled across television screens, slid into headlines, whispered through radios in passing cars. Oliver Robinson watched it unfold from the safe house couch, the volume low, the captions enough. American crime boss flees justice. Fiancée left behind as feds raid penthouse. Sources confirm Robinson resisted arrest. On screen, Linda appeared wrapped in white, eyes red-rimmed, hands trembling as she clutched a microphone outside a federal building. Cameras loved her. They always had. I just want the truth, she said softly. I didn't know the man I was going to marry. Oliver turned away. They're painting you as unstable, Carolyn said from the kitchen, voice calm. She was already 2 steps ahead, scrolling through feeds, cross-referencing timestamps. Violent, paranoid, dangerous. And her? Oliver asked. Brave, betrayed, cooperative. He laughed quietly. She's always been good at playing the room. Carolyn joined him, setting a mug down beside his untouched water. The story will harden in 48 hours. After that, it becomes fact. So we disappear, Oliver said. Carolyn shook her head. No. He looked at her sharply. We go public, she continued, on our terms. Silence stretched. You want me to walk into a spotlight, Oliver said slowly, after they've labeled me a fugitive. Yes. That's suicide. No, Carolyn replied. That's disruption. She turned the laptop toward him. A headline filled the screen. Linda Robinson to speak at Metropolitan Charity Gala. Oliver's eyes narrowed. She's consolidating her narrative, Carolyn said. High society, federal donors, media everywhere, politicians smiling for cameras. And you want to crash it. I want to expose it. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. That gala is the only place where Linda, the press, and the federal handlers will all be in one room. That's not coincidence. That's arrogance. Oliver studied the screen. You've thought this through. I've been thinking about it since the night I heard her say your name like it was already past tense. She clicked again. Blueprints appeared. The Met's East Wing, she said. Service entrances. Blind spots. Temporary cameras installed for the event, but not integrated into federal feeds. Oliver felt something stir familiar, dangerous. Forged identities, Carolyn continued. High-level donors. Clean paper trail. We arrive separately. And weapons? Oliver asked. Concealed, she replied. Non-lethal unless absolutely necessary. He smiled faintly. You've done this before. Yes. And you trust me to walk in calm, he said. I trust you to stop running. That landed. Oliver stood and crossed to the window, watching the city move on without him. He'd spent his life staying ahead of the law, ahead of enemies, ahead of consequences. Running had kept him alive. But it had never set him free. When we do this, he said, there's no going back. Carolyn nodded. I know. He turned to face her fully. Then let's end the lie, Oliver said. For the first time since the night began, Carolyn smiled without restraint. They worked through the day. Routes, timings, disguises. Carolyn moved pieces across the table like a grandmaster, her mind mapping security patterns, predicting human behavior. Oliver watched, learning the version of her the world had never been allowed to see. By nightfall, the plan was set. The city outside glowed, unaware. And somewhere downtown, Linda Robinson practiced her tears in the mirror, convinced the story was already hers. She was wrong. Oliver Robinson wasn't finished. He was just done hiding. The Metropolitan Museum glittered like a cathedral to excess. Crystal chandeliers spilled light onto marble floors. Champagne flowed freely. Power gathered in tailored suits and silk gowns, laughing too loudly, shaking hands that had signed warrants and sealed fortunes. This was where reputations were laundered and sins were forgiven if you could afford the ticket. Linda Robinson stood at the center of it all. She wore white. Not bridal. Not innocent. Strategic. The color caught the cameras perfectly, made her look fragile beneath the lights. As she stepped onto the stage, the room softened. Conversations quieted. Phones rose discreetly. She dabbed at her eyes. I never imagined I'd be standing here like this, Linda began, voice trembling just enough. I thought I knew the man I was going to marry. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Oliver Robinson's name hovered unspoken, poisonous and electric. He told me he wanted to change, Linda continued, that he was leaving that world behind. I believed him. In the shadows near the service corridor, Oliver watched. Alive. Unrecognizable. He wore a tailored tuxedo under a forged identity, posture relaxed, expression calm. No rage, no fear, just precision. Carolyn stood across the room, indistinguishable from security staff, her gaze never leaving the stage. Linda pressed on. When the authorities came, she said, voice cracking, I cooperated fully. I did what any law-abiding citizen would do. A few sympathetic nods. A senator wiped an imaginary tear. Oliver almost admired the performance. Almost. He stepped forward. The click of his shoes on marble was soft, but it echoed. Heads turned. A ripple of confusion spread, then disbelief. Someone gasped. Linda's voice faltered. Oliver Robinson walked into the light. Alive. The room froze. For a heartbeat, the lie tried to survive. Linda's eyes widened. Color drained from her face as she stared at the man she'd already buried. Oliver, she whispered, forgetting the microphone was still live. Cameras swung wildly. Security shifted, uncertain. Oliver stopped just short of the stage, hands visible, posture open. Hello, Linda, he said calmly. The room erupted in whispers. That's impossible, someone muttered. Linda's handler stepped forward too late. The screens behind the stage flickered, then lit up. Audio played first. Linda's voice, cold and sharp. Once the evidence is planted, he's finished. Gasps cut through the air. The next clip rolled seamlessly. Alexander's voice followed. By the time the raid hits, he'll panic. Crossfire does the rest. The room exploded. Linda spun toward the screens, shaking her head violently. This is fabricated. Oliver didn't move. More footage played. Video now. Linda and Alexander in the penthouse. Gloves. Evidence bags. Timelines discussed like vacation plans. First-degree murder. Linda said on screen. He dies in custody. We walk away with everything. The woman on stage staggered back as if struck. This is illegal, she screamed. Turn it off. Too late. The truth was already alive. Alexander, standing near the bar, realized it at the same time. His hand moved. Carolyn saw it instantly. Time slowed. Alexander reached inside his jacket, eyes wild, calculating one last escape. Carolyn didn't hesitate. The suppressed shot cracked the air sharp, controlled. Alexander went down hard, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Panic tore through the gala. Guests scattered. Glass shattered. Security shouted conflicting orders. Oliver stepped back, hands raised. Check the evidence, he said loudly. All of it. FBI agents pushed through the chaos, faces grim. They didn't look at Oliver. They looked at Linda. One agent met Oliver's eyes briefly, then turned away, jaw clenched. Handcuffs clicked shut around Linda's wrists. No, she sobbed. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Oliver said softly. She collapsed as they led her away. Alexander was dragged out next, blood staining the marble he'd once walked across as a trusted protector. The gala lay in ruins. Cameras caught everything. And for the first time that night, Oliver Robinson didn't disappear into the shadows. He stood. And the lie died screaming. The fallout was quieter than the explosion. That was how Oliver knew it was real. No shouting press conferences. No dramatic arrests paraded for cameras. Just a closed room, fluorescent lights, and men and women who suddenly realized the story they'd rehearsed no longer worked. Oliver sat at the steel table, hands folded, posture relaxed. A week ago, this room would have been his grave. Now it was a negotiation chamber. Across from him sat 3 federal officials and a woman from Internal Affairs who hadn't blinked once since she arrived. Files were stacked neatly in front of them, new files. Clean files. The kind that rewrote futures. Carolyn stood at Oliver's side. Not behind him. Beside him. That detail did not go unnoticed. We're prepared to discuss terms, the woman from Internal Affairs said carefully. But understand this, your history complicates matters. Oliver smiled faintly. So does yours. She stiffened. Let's not pretend this is about justice, Oliver continued calmly. It's about containment, damage control. And Dewey. You can bury this quietly, or you can let it eat its way up the chain. Silence. One of the men cleared his throat. Alexander Pierce has agreed to cooperate. Carolyn's jaw tightened just slightly. Of course he has, Oliver said. Self-preservation was always his strongest trait. He's named names, the man went on. Judges. Financial auditors. 2 senior agents. Oliver leaned back. And Linda? The woman answered this time. She's being held without bail, federal detention. Her handlers have disavowed her. Disavowed. Oliver absorbed that. Linda had always believed she was protected by something bigger than herself. It amused him, briefly, to imagine the moment she realized she wasn't. Charges against you, the woman continued, will be dropped. Quietly. No public apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I don't need your apology, Oliver said. I need my assets unfrozen. Another pause. You'll get the legal businesses, she said. The offshore accounts remain under review. Oliver glanced at Carolyn. She nodded once. That's acceptable, Oliver said. The officials leaned in. My name is cleared, he said. Not praised, not celebrated, cleared. No fugitive designation, no sealed warrants waiting to resurface when it's convenient. The woman studied him. And in return? Oliver met her gaze. You get my silence. That landed. You walk away, he added. So do I. The negotiation ended an hour later. No handshakes, no smiles. Just signatures and quiet exits. Outside, the city carried on like nothing had happened. Oliver stepped into the sunlight with Carolyn beside him, the weight of the past week settling into something manageable at last. "It's done," he said. "For now," Carolyn replied. They stood on the courthouse steps, neither of them in a hurry. "What will you do?" she asked. Oliver considered the question. "Rebuild," he said finally. "But not the same way." She nodded. "Good." They walked away together, not as boss and assistant, not as savior and saved, but as equals who had survived something designed to erase them both. Behind them, doors closed softly. And the world moved on, unaware of how close it had come to swallowing its own lie whole. The city looked different from above, not kinder, not softer, just honest. Oliver stood at the edge of the rooftop, hands resting on the cold metal railing, watching Manhattan burn with light, streets braided with traffic, windows glowing like constellations. Somewhere below, lives moved forward without knowing how close one man had come to being erased from them. A week ago, he'd stood in rooms like this believing power was permanence. Now he knew better. Footsteps approached behind him, quiet, unannounced. Carolyn joined him at the railing, the wind tugging at her hair, the city reflecting faintly in her eyes. She didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Silence had become something they shared. "I keep thinking about what I lost," Oliver said finally. "And what I didn't." Carolyn glanced at him. "They're not the same thing." "No," he agreed. "They aren't." He thought of the men who hadn't made it, the empire that had collapsed overnight, the name that would never mean what it once did. "I don't want it back the way it was," he said. "That world only knows how to consume." Carolyn studied the city. "Then don't rebuild a throne," she said. "Build a foundation." Oliver smiled faintly. "You've been thinking about this too." "I don't follow people who don't plan," she replied. He turned toward her fully. "They'll say you saved me," he said. "They'll frame you as the quiet woman behind the man who survived." Carolyn's expression hardened, not angry, but resolved. "I didn't save you," she said. "I chose you." "There's a difference." Oliver nodded. "Then choose this with me." She met his gaze, searching for something weakness, perhaps. Or expectation. "I won't stand behind you," she said. "Not now, not ever." "I wouldn't ask you to." "And I won't be protected," she added. "I don't need a savior." Oliver held her eyes. "I'm not offering to save you." A beat passed. "I'm offering to build with you," he said. "Equal ground. Clean lines. No ghosts we don't invite." The wind rushed between them, carrying the distant sound of the city. Carolyn considered him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Partners," she said. "Not romantic. Not dramatic. Honest." They stood side by side as the night deepened, two silhouettes against a skyline that had nearly swallowed them whole. The future wasn't safe, but it was theirs. And for the first time in a long while, Oliver Robinson didn't fear what came next. He welcomed it. Like this story. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. And comment the city you're watching from, because the next story will go even